Before he became an apostle, Paul had persecuted believers of Jesus. While he was going to Damascus to arrest them, he heard the voice of Jesus. From then on, Paul realized that the Bible he believed in was the word about Jesus that testified him. Soon, Paul became passionate about Jesus. However, many Jews in Jerusalem did not listen to Paul's story. So Paul traveled to various regions in the northern part of Israel to tell what he had experienced and learned. After that, he crossed the sea and began to preach about Jesus in Macedonia, Corinth, and Athens, which are now Eastern Europe. When people heard his story and believed in Jesus, Paul established a church there. He stayed in the church there for a few days or even years, teaching about Jesus and the Bible. During his second journey to spread the gospel, Paul went to a city called Thessalonica. He preached about Jesus in the Jewish synagogue for 3 weeks. Most of the Jews rejected Paul, but many of the Thessalonians listened to Paul and began to follow him. Then the Jews accused them of following a different king, Jesus, and not the Roman emperor. In the end, Paul could no longer stay in Thessalonica and had no choice but to leave. But the fellowship between Paul and the Thessalonian church did not end there. They exchanged letters. The church asked Paul questions about their religious life, and Paul responded with a heart full of affection. Among the 27 books of the New Testament, 2 books are letters exchanged between the Thessalonian church and Paul. Furthermore, 1 Thessalonians is the first book which was written amongst the New Testament. After Paul left Thessalonica, he learned how the church that remained there lived its life of faith. So he wrote this reply: I constantly remember your work of faith, and your labor of love, and your perseverance and hope in Jesus before our God and Father. He also heard that many churches in the region of Macedonia wanted to become like the church in Thessalonica. How happy must Paul have been to see the church in Thessalonica growing as a model for the church. Next, Paul wanted the Thessalonians to have a strong heart like soldiers, and he said, Be sober-minded, put on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation as a helmet. And he left the Thessalonians with these famous words: Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Although it was only a few weeks of meeting, it seems that the seeds of the word that Paul sowed were growing well in the Thessalonian church and were bearing much fruit.